What is up, Las Vegas? Welcome in, everybody. We are here for a very special cannabis-based episode. I'm here with Sidney Quitorio. My bad. I already messed up. I rehearsed that like 40 times and still messed it up. Sidney is the CEO and founder of Native Leaf Co. and Purple Rose Supply. He brought some stuff with us here, which is sitting on the table. Purple Rose Supply is creating exceptional cannabis accessories that elevate the smoking experience, and Native Leaf Co. encourages those to smoke natural. Sidney, thank you for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Jake. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for these wonderful gift.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Didn't get to open it yet. I have a feeling we're in for a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah, definitely. These are our CannaMolds, and it's gonna let you pack your own cigar that's gonna burn for hours, So now that you're back to smoking, I'm sure you're gonna be really excited to try it.
Yeah, man, I am. It was there was a long, brief stint where I didn't smoke for a long time, and in college I was kind of an avid smoker. I never really smoked during the semester when I was in college, but I always smoked like during winter break and summer.
Nice.
It always makes me like incredibly lazy at times.
Yeah.
It was always like a smoke and chill for me, where I have some friends who could do dabs and then go study neuroscience and be completely okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have kind of like mixed feelings about that myself. Like for me, I was always that smoker where, I had to finish my homework first, and then after I get like super lit. And I definitely have, at times gotten to like calculus class or physics class, like blazed out of my mind, but I don't feel like it gets me that 100% mindset that I need to be to completely absorb that knowledge. So I'm always like, I'll hold off. Yeah.
Have you always been an avid smoker or had a love for cannabis?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the first time I tried it, I want to say I was like 13 or maybe 12 years old. And after that, it's kind of been, just go ever since then.
Been consistent?
Yeah. Obviously, when I was younger, I barely had money. So sometimes when me and my friends could finally put together enough for a dub sack, that's when we would smoke. But then outside of that, it wasn't until like, I was maybe like 17, 18. I had jobs and stuff like that when I really started smoking every single day.
Well, obviously, you've been a very avid worker. You worked in Silicon Valley for about 6 years, what I have written down here. And you went to San Jose State for computer software engineering, and you're a software engineer in Silicon Valley. So that seemed to the smoking cannabis or marijuana maybe amplified your own expertise in the space rather than hindering your progress.
Oh yeah, definitely. Now that I got into the space I mean, it's given me a lot of the background knowledge, and more than that, just like the passion to be able to, understand what the customers, even myself as a customer, would want, and really create products that amplify my own life, So that was definitely exciting. And, even though Silicon Valley isn't necessarily the cannabis like mecca of the world, having that, I guess, being able to sometimes smoke and have that creativity to the code that I'm putting in definitely helps sometimes,
So why would somebody leave Silicon Valley? It seems to be such a prestigious area. Many of the most brilliant minds in the entire world try to confide in that area to build some sort of progress, whether they're working for some tech Goliath like Facebook or they're building some sort of startup. What was your experience like in Silicon Valley, and why did you ultimately end up leaving?
Yeah, that's like a big box to unpack,
We got time. We got time.
Like, first thing I'm going to say is, definitely software engineering is an absolutely rewarding career. For me, myself, I love learning. I love expanding my knowledge, expanding like, kind of just pushing the boundaries of what I think I'm capable of. So I love that aspect of software engineering. And I definitely love that, within Silicon Valley, at least the companies that I've worked for, they're very, very mission based. So I love that aspect as well. But in the end, with the amount of hours that you have to work, the amount of, I guess, overall effort that you really have to dive yourself into, at times you kind of have to ask yourself, I'm kind of grinding myself really, really hard right now. Am I really grinding it for something that if I was like, let's say a billionaire, that I would be grinding this hard for this tomorrow, And when I was in there and I kept asking myself that, I just felt like the answer kept coming up is no. Realistically, if I was given $1 billion, I wouldn't do that. I'd be doing what I'm doing right now, which is Purple Rose Supply and Native Leaf. And after I kind of started transitioning and thinking about that, obviously the transition wasn't like cut and dry. I was still working as a software engineer when I created Purple Rose Supply and started thinking about the ideas of Native Leaf. But whenever I would work on Purple Rose Supply, I would, like, not that I wouldn't get into that flow state when I was programming, but whenever it was Purple Rose Supply, it was just instantly, like, as soon as I go in, like, time disappears. I don't even think about stuff. I don't even think about, oh shit, I haven't even eaten in like 12 hours right now. And it's really just because of the passion that I had for the industry, the passion that I had creating products, again, for people like myself. It was very different than when I was coding. And again, sometimes I do miss coding, because I do like miss solving those types of problems every now and then. But when it comes to building your own company, there's more than enough of those problems that pop up,
Oh, I definitely can relate to that. Do you think your technical knowledge of being a computer software engineer has assisted in your startup mentality? Because when you're a coder, you tend to find the little nuance intricacies of the code, right? One letter or one symbol can just completely dismember the entire code.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And, I feel like in general, being an engineer, I was able to extract a lot of skills in which I currently use today, like problem solving, scientific thinking, all of those things we use like on the daily at work, and even though, I'm no longer technically an engineer, I still think of myself as that. And everybody that works within the company, I kind of try to teach that those same fundamentals, how to think scientifically, how to take a very, very large problem where you don't even know where to start and break it down into simple pieces and start solving each individual one. I feel like that's a very, very key thing to both engineering and almost any other industry you want to take that in. It's a very, very useful skill in my opinion.
Yeah, code is very black and white. It's very binary, ones and zeros. Mm-hmm. There is no subjectivity to it. Whereas becoming a startup founder, there is a ton of gray area that you have to figure out. But then from that gray area, you have to push that to either the black side or the white side. Is that the right direction to go? Is that the wrong direction to go? And so having that ability to kind of figure out what the issue is, discovering it, is usually one of the major requirements to a startup founder. When I was building Chameleon, I didn't have any technical knowledge. And now looking at it retrospectively, I think that was a major disadvantage, because I wasn't able to kind of peer under the hood and understand the different mechanics to it. And so now you're kind of on the reverse end of how I went about my life, where you can immediately peer into the engine, understand the entire mechanics of it, and then kind of work backwards from that angle. Yeah,
absolutely. I 100% agree. I guess in that sense, it is absolutely advantageous. And especially, I worked, most of my career was with startups. So I built a lot of like skills wearing different hats. I had to often come up with like product requirements, oftentimes work as a product manager. And though, again, those skills could be applied almost any industry you go in. So I'm thankful in that regard.
When you dove into the realm of startups, were there any specific missions that you're looking for that fit your requirements to send in your job application?
At the time, when I was first starting to look, I was a broke college kid. So I was pretty much applying everywhere. But eventually I found one where it really was a mission-focused startup, and although it wasn't 100% the same mission that I'm on now, it was pretty aligned. It was all about giving people the opportunity to essentially be better than where they currently are at life, in a very, very broad sense. And in that same sense, that's pretty much what we try to do at Purple Rose Supply and Native Leaf Co. One of the strongest driving vision statements in our company is to create a world where people are inspired to be the best that they could be. And again, that is that if I was given $1 billion, that's exactly what I would be doing the very, very next day, you know. So although the company that I was previously at wasn't 100% exactly aligned with that mission, it still kind of went along that same path, you know. It's a little bit general, but but I don't want to really talk about that other company on this.
Of course. Inspiring others to be their best self is a very general and broad vision. How does Purple Rose go about trying to enact this mission?
Yes, so Purple Rose Supply definitely tries to do that by giving people like the best cannabis accessories, you know, to really, really push the envelope of what the current best is, you know. And Native Leaf is all about challenging those who want to smoke natural. You know, when I was, as I mentioned, I would smoke heavily, and I would always think that, oh, these papers are the most natural papers out there. And when I really started doing research into papers, it's like, well, this isn't exactly natural. You know, there's a whole bunch of stuff here that had I known was in this whole time, I would have not felt like this, you know. And I started doing research into, okay, what's the best way we could provide customers with the most natural wrap out there? And then eventually I started realizing that, you know what, nobody is doing this right now. You know, if you get papers tested, or if you were to go into their facilities and see how it's currently made, you know, what stuff is actually within that, if you get lab tests, I would assume that most people would not be happy. You know, even the cannabis that people buy in the dispensaries, you know, you think it's pretty regulated, but when you see what's actually regulated, you're like, that's not enough, you know. Even within the food we buy, everything like that. So with Native Leaf Co., we decided to kind of like change that around and offer something that has never been on the market, and that's 100% whole hemp leaf wraps. You know, we essentially just take the leaves from the cannabis plant or hemp plant. It's the plant that, you know, everyone loves smoking, and why not take the wrap that plant has already given, and which is the leaves. So we essentially take those, we don't process them, we just glue them together, we cure them for a very, very long time, and eventually not only does it end up as the most natural wrap, but it ends up as, in my opinion, the tastiest wrap out there. It really lets you unlock the full flavors of your cannabis because there's no bullshit in there. You know, we don't do anything that's unnatural that you would not find in nature out there. And you know, just that fact alone, I feel like we're the only company out there that does that. So it's really about just getting people to challenge what the status quo is, you know, and say, hey, this is supposedly natural, but if we look into this, it's not good enough, you know.
You would think an industry surrounding a naturally grown plant, everything that goes into the entire process would be natural, but maybe that's just a product of commercialization where companies tend to cut corners, which therefore they need to save on their bottom line. So they maybe they use a different product, which isn't 100% natural. And then that just becomes the norm over time. That seems to be what happens with commercialization of products. Oh yeah, absolutely. And even when it comes to things like, you know, USDA organic, it's like, sure, some of this stuff is organic, but also they also let a whole bunch of things that aren't really necessarily safe on there, you know, like neem oil, things like that. Some of those are okay to be let in cannabis products when it's known to not be safe. And even though it's organic, we've had to deal with a lot of farms that we worked with that had USDA organic seals, and we're like, no, this isn't good enough, you know. So it's although it's difficult, it is really rewarding when we do find those partners and we really get to put that product out into the market and customers get a chance to smoke their best, and not only smoke their best, but are inspired to kind of just question everything that they're doing. You know, is this so-called natural organic food that I'm eating? Is it really, really good for me? Is this really the best that I got? You know, there's so many mislabels and misrepresentations, like cage-free. I saw a documentary about cage-free eggs where the chickens are supposed to be cage-free, but the cage only extends, or like they're in a warehouse, but there's technically no cage and they're all tightly compact, and it's almost representative of being in a cage. There's just literally no cage, but it has the same after effects. Yeah, some things are just little labels, I guess, right? Yeah, it's tough. So when you used your technical knowledge to diagnose this issue in the industry that there weren't any sort of natural products, at least to your preparation. How long did it take you to put a product on the table, and kind of how long was that startup process to tinkering around with different products, communicating with different distributors and manufacturers, et cetera?
Yeah. Let's say I had the idea in 2018 and we didn't really get to launch it until end of 2020. So it took a handful of years. But again, for some of that, I was still working part-time as a software engineer. And it wasn't until we moved to Vegas that I had the time to fully tinker and dive myself into it and really solve the problem. So, which is why it took a little bit longer. But yeah, it was definitely a long process. You know, what we were trying to do was, again, nobody's ever done it. And just that alone was kind of like, okay, where do we start? But again, you know, thankfully I had a little bit of background to be able to take that very, very large problem, break it down into several smaller problems and start solving those individually, you know, so kind of helps in that aspect.
Did you feel that Vegas was the right place to begin this endeavor?
Yeah, well, you know, I did go to high school here and my parents are still here. So I had a little bit of family and friends that I could kind of rely on if I were to move to Las Vegas. Along with that, like, you know, property is so cheap out here, getting a facility, getting a house, rent, you know, compared to like San Francisco where I was paying like $1,850 for a 300 square foot little room, you know. So it was much better in that regard. And again, like when it came to hiring things like that, like, you know, got to hire like my sister, I got to hire like friends that I grew up with. So that was very advantageous, which is, you know, that along with how cheap it was out here is what kind of led me to move over here.
Okay.
Or move back.
Yeah, so it was more of the context of the situation rather than the industry itself. And the reason I ask is because it seems that there are a lot of cannabis-based companies moving out to Vegas. Obviously, there's no state tax, so that's a big benefit as well. But it seems like there's new dispensaries opening up left and right. I'm continually meeting more people that are finding different nuanced ways to kind of inject themselves into the industry. I had on one of my first episodes with this woman named Juliana Whitney. She has a cannabis consulting agency, and we discussed on there pretty much how the back end of all of these cannabis companies is pretty much chaos, and everyone's kind of just running around with their head cut off because the regulations really haven't caught up, as you spoke earlier, to where the industry is itself. So it's more so a lot of people moving around and breaking things, kind of very similar to how the tech industry operates as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, like you said, the cannabis industry is absolutely big in Vegas, and it's getting larger by the day. And it is kind of like the Wild West, and that not only applies to Vegas, but all across the industry, where there's so many things that I guess people haven't done, so many things that are not regulated as we'd want it to. You know, for example, like I said, if you take products out there, take them to the labs, I don't think you'll be happy, you know?
It's tough. Are there any major hurdles that you had to overcome that you thought was going to be at some point a hurdle that you just weren't able to climb over?
I would say there's hurdles that always feel like that. But at the end of the day, I always feel like, you know, no matter what's in front of you and no matter how daunting it is, I feel like so long as you keep going 1 foot forward and taking time to reflect and really think about how you could break this large, mountain of a problem down, I almost feel like almost anything is solvable, you know. But absolutely, you know, I would even argue we're in a little bit of a situation like that right now with finding more clean farm partners to get leaves from, you know, because again, with Native Leaf, we want the cleanest product out there, because we're trying to produce the cleanest product. So we have to start with the best product, and finding farms out there that have like the cleanest leaves, absolutely challenging, you know.
So what's that evaluation process like? What are the technicals that you're looking for?
Yeah, we always look, we actually send it to the most extensively or the labs that test the most extensive things. Because if you send it to local Nevada labs, they actually only test for a handful of pesticides, although they test for most of the heavy metals out there. Still, you're only getting a snippet of the pesticides, and even then some of those limits are too high. Like when I started doing research, I was like, well, the state of Nevada says like it's okay to have this much, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I feel like it needs to be much, much lower than this. So definitely taking clean leaves and just getting that clean bill of health from labs that will absolutely test almost all the pesticides out there. That's one of the hardest challenges, you know. And again, you'd be surprised at how many organic farms out there fail that list. And you would think it's like it's USDA organic. It costs it's really, really hard to get that certification. You would feel like they would have clean leaves, but doesn't appear to be the case. Even when we were testing with starter material, like we ran a handful of tests, and one time we actually needed to test like starting with very, very clean leaf material. So we were trying to actually start with spinach, right? And even getting organic spinach tested, you're like, is this really clean? You know? And having like dirty lab results like that, it's like it kind of throws you off, you know, and it makes you question everything, which in the end, is what we're absolutely trying to have everyone else do, question everything that they're putting into their body, you know.
Smart. You have to take a very contrarian approach to it. There's a massive movement for organic-based products, but also the sourcing that goes into it as well. That's not just cannabis. That's, the food and beverage industry, even now for just basic materials, right, as well, or even sourcing diamonds and things like that, right? Like they always talk about blood diamonds, and you have to have the ethical approach to everything like that. Mm-hmm. Is there a huge demand for the product that you're building right now, or are you prepping yourself for a foresight to where this is going to become a big issue in the future?
It's a little bit of both, like right now there is absolutely a huge demand. Like I think our wait list right now is over 3,000 people that want to buy the wraps. But again, we've had a little bit of a slowdown just because, we've had to turn down many, many farms. And especially now that, or previously hemp was out of season, it's getting back in season now. It was really hard to find a bunch of those farms, or at least indoor farms, that would provide leaves that clean. So there was definitely a little bit of that, and right now, like I said, there is a strong demand, but I feel like that demand is growing even more every day. A lot of cannabis smokers, myself included, would like to roll our stuff in tobacco, because that nicotine kind of takes you to another level.
Punch,
yeah, exactly. That'll absolutely wake you up, and it makes sense why people like it. But it's like, is that really the most mindful consumption that you could have?
Are there any drastic health implications to smoking something that is not, let's say, native leaf co based, or like the requirements?
I like for me personally, I mean, I'm no doctor. So I absolutely can't, I don't want to, speak on that and say like, oh yeah, it's absolutely healthier to smoke our product versus something else. But I just know that I wouldn't want to smoke a product with pesticides or heavy metals on them. So I feel like others wouldn't. And again, I just don't feel like I should make that official like health stamp. But in my opinion, I don't think anyone should do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's obviously it's more of a preference at this moment, but that's probably based on the lack of extensive research, because this is an cannabis has been around for centuries, but the industry's only been legal for 5 years, maybe 8 years across the country. So there's no long-term research, at least publicly shown, that can show you the impact. So you kind of have to just go off of maybe what seems
to be the right thing,
but you're unsure.
Yeah, I absolutely hear you on that. But there is a lot of research in other industries that show that, hey, these chemicals are not good for you, and these chemicals should only be intaken at this daily acceptable limit. And yet most companies go well above that. So although there's not a lot of research in how like pesticides or heavy metals affect cannabis, absolutely research on those chemicals themselves and like our water content, things like that. I've read a lot of like reports that the World Health Organization put out there, and that's kind of how we define like our a lot of our limits, and just doing a lot of research in there's tons of white papers out there where people have tested these chemicals and said you shouldn't have no more than this. But even in our food, like if you were to get our food tested, you would notice that it's well above that limit that a lot of people say you should have.
Yeah. Have you ever seen that video on YouTube where they test out the pH levels of like 5 different water bottle companies or water companies of just like a store-bought water and Aquafina and Fiji, and they put this like food coloring in it to show the amount of metals that are in just like bottled water that is sold commercially. And it's like almost every single one outside of Fiji has just like a massive amount of metals in it.
I actually didn't see that.
Yeah, it was
Send me that.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. Yeah, it's a popular one on the internet, but it's not just water. It's food all over the place. I mean, even when you look at the fast food industry, right? It's well known across the board that fast food's not good for you, but people tend to dive into it anyways. And it's having these preservatives and additives that are added into your food is definitely shortening your lifespan.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I just started to try to go vegan lately because doctor said I got a little high cholesterol. So, so I started going that, and I was finding like vegan protein powders and stuff like that. And even then, when I was looking into that, I was like, wow, these have a strong problem with heavy metals. You know, a lot of them, again, have that have a concentration much higher than a lot of people recommend. And you would think like, you know, when you go into like the vegan health food route, you would think like, okay, it's sold at Whole Foods, it should be clean, right? Apparently not.
Yeah. At least you're smart enough and take the initiative to do your own research, because the majority of the population does not do that. They're just looking for the buzzwords that wrap the package that they're buying. And they're like, oh, it says keto, it must be healthier. Oh, it says organic, but what is organic energy drinks? That was a joke I used to make with my friends that drink Celsius drinks. Are you aware of what Celsius is?
I never heard of that before.
So it's like a quote organic energy drink, but then I tell them like, what does that mean? Like you don't grow energy drinks. Like you can't they're like, oh, but the ingredients are. But then when you flip the package on the back,
it's talking about coffee.
Yeah, right. It's when I always tell people, if you look at the ingredients on a package and there's a lot of words with X, Y's, and Z's, because you're generally not naturally grown ingredients.
I feel like if you can't recognize the thing and you can't picture what it is in your mind, I'm like, you might want to look that up, you know?
It's a tough industry out there. I do want to go back a little bit though, as you're talking about Native Leaf. You said there's a massive wait list of about 3,000 people waiting to get this product. How much of this product are you selling per year, or we'll just say last year since you just started recently? Yeah,
last year we sold a handful of hundreds. I think I want to say maybe a little over 1,000. And then, you know, a little winter season hit, so it was much harder to source those leaves. So we did kind of have to go out of stock for a handful of weeks. I think now maybe it's been a little bit more than that. It's probably been a little over 2 months now. And that's again just because hemp is out of season, and we're actually only limited to indoor farms. Thankfully, it's opening back up, so hopefully that changes. And we do have, even though there's a lot of non-clean people out there, we have a lot of farm partners that we work with that are kind of on the same mission as us. So that is really, really, it's a little bit of a boost, and a little bit, makes you feel a lot better that, not only are you trying to tackle this, but a lot of other people are too, So being out of stock like that was.
Are you selling your product primarily through e-commerce platform, or
yes, e-commerce,
or are you established in any of the local dispensaries?
Right now it's just e-commerce, just due to volume. Absolutely. Once we start producing a lot more, we start getting a lot more clean leaves, then we're gonna start selling through our distribution network, similar to Purple Rose Supply. We're carried in a lot of smoke shops all across the country, so we could definitely tap into those distribution networks once we kind of get enough leaf volume. And it is a little bit hard because we also we handcraft these leaves. They're cured by us. We take care of them. Actually, if you've ever bought a native leaf pack, most likely I've touched that leaf. Most likely I was the one out on that field that harvested that.
Super trooper.
Yeah,
I love it. And I know Purple Rose Supply is your heavy hitter, right? As you said, you sell your products through many different distribution channels across the entire country. And Native Leaf, it seems like you have a little bit more of a natural feel for it, or you seem a little bit more closely tied to the product. It's something you firmly believe in.
Oh yeah.
What inspired you to create Purple Rose Supply and the Cannagar, which I've watched a handful of videos on, and I have to say it's wildly awesome to see that you can roll 14 to 28 grams in a little cigar and smoke it for 2 hours.
Yeah, those 14 grammars will probably last a little more than 2 hours, like 4 hours usually. But I saw, because Cannagars are essentially cannabis cigars. They came from Thai sticks that were really, really popular back in the 70s. People would create them by like skewering nugs of cannabis, wrapping it around with hemp wick to kind of get that compressed cannabis cigar. And the benefit, again, is really that slow burn time. But when I started, I've kind of always known about Thai sticks, just for me, when I was a kid, I was super excited and smoking weed. And I was like, I want to learn like more about different strains and things like that. And I learned briefly about Thai sticks, but I never got to try it. And then I think it was 2016 or 2017. I want to say 2016, where I saw my first implementation of what's now called a Cannagar. They're just Thai sticks essentially that are done up a little fancier. They're also the flower is not only compressed, but they're wrapped in like concentrates like wax, shatter, things like that, and rolled with hemp fan leaves. And when I started seeing that, I was like, oh wow, I got to smoke that. I ended up trying to make it. I tried to make it like 3 or 4 times. I finally got one to work halfway. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, it took me about an hour to roll this. And what ends up happening is like it falls apart, and I just kept looking at those Cannagars I was seeing online on Instagram. And I was like, well, I still need to figure this out to smoke it. So I created a little device to help me. And then that device was essentially, I didn't know it at the time, but that was essentially like the first prototype of what's it called? Or CannaMold, and like the first inception of Purple Rose Supply. And when I made that little device, and I had my friends smoke it, they were like, this is crazy. This is crazy. And then they started getting this idea in my head, and, me as well. I was like, you know what? I think maybe we should kind of pursue this route, So that's when I started to think about, okay, how am I going to actually launch this little tool again that I just made for myself and launch it and give it to the whole public, And one thing that I was really, really most influenced about in seeing that was because, those Cannagars that I was seeing, they actually were selling for like $400, $600. And I was like, wait a minute, they're only sold in one state right now. So you mean I got to take a $300 flight to Washington, go to the dispensary, buy a $420 Cannagar, smoke it, and then fly my high ass back home? Like that's crazy, And I was like, there's so many other people that probably have the same problem too. So it was really giving that accessibility to everyone, giving everyone the option to smoke one. That was kind of like the driver behind spreading it around everyone, and that's kind of how Purple Rose Supply was formed.
Yeah, it's an amazing product. How much do these sell for?
Yeah, so they sell for $49 and $54 depending on the size.
It's a heavy discount from $420.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we always tell everyone, because I've smoked those really, really expensive Cannagars, and they're good, but I think some of the best ones were some that either I rolled myself or a friend rolled. And I've had some that were much, much better than those pre-made ones out there.
And what are your primary distribution channels?
Right now, e-commerce, absolutely. But along with that, we have distribution channels with tons of cannabis accessory distributors out there who kind of like sell to smoke shops. We also sell directly to smoke shops as well. And, as you're familiar with in Vegas, there's tons of smoke shops everywhere. So there's always somebody.
Yeah. Are you allowed to sell these in dispensaries, or is it only smoke shops?
We could sell them in dispensaries, but something we found is in dispensaries, a lot of people are really there just for the weed and not necessarily there for accessories. When it comes to like buying a bong or something like that, or buying a nice pipe, a dab rig, anything like that, they actually prefer to go to smoke shops. So although I think we have some dispensaries that we sell to, we predominantly focus on smoke shops.
That's an interesting observation. I never actually thought of that. Yeah, when you go to a dispensary, you're primarily there for edibles or for oil or the flower.
Nice flower, yeah, absolutely.
How many products have you sold over the 4 years that you've been doing this, or 5?
Oh, shoot, I can't even tell you now. I was familiar with those, and this is a little bit bad on my part. I would probably need to pull up some data on Google Analytics to figure that out. But definitely upwards of a lot more than 20,000. I want to say maybe close to like 40, 50,000, something like that.
That's a nice size product.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've had a decent size product market fit.
Oh yeah.
And at that point, it just becomes about marketing. Obviously, your proof of concept is more than just a concept at this point.
Yeah,
It's a working product. You just have to market to the right people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it still amazes me all the time, you know. Well, when I did my first trade show and I went out there and I started kind of talking to people, and every time somebody saw it, they just like their eyes lit up and they absolutely loved it. And to this day, I always still get emails from everyone. Every day I open the emails and I read like all these nice things that customers say, and it's just very rewarding to create something that not only something that I love, but something that everyone loves just as much as me, you know. So I love it.
So how do we go about scaling something like this? Is there a main channel to make sure that this product succeeds? What's up, YouTube? We're going to take a quick 60-second break to give a shout out to the first ever sponsor of the Guest List podcast, and it is none other than Manscaped. It's June, summer is here, Fremont Street is packed. I was out the last 3 nights till 3 a.m. It felt like old Vegas. We're getting ready to go to the day clubs. And you know, for one, as a man, we need to make sure that we are trimmed in the right areas. I'm a big fan of Manscaped. Like I said, I use the product. I'm happy that they came on to be a sponsor. But lucky for us, they just came out with a brand new product for us. And I'm going to read it off just so I don't mess up. From the legends who introduced the greatest electric ball hair trimmer ever, Manscaped is now introducing the Ultra Smooth Package, a razor and formulation kit designed for the brave men out there who like to go to the skin when they trim their balls. Your new nickname is going to be the Bald Eagle after using the Ultra Smooth Package. Here's a picture of it. Make sure you guys use the discount code TheGuestList. You're listening to The Guest List. Use the promo code TheGuestList. Very simple. You'll get 20% off and free shipping anywhere in the United States. If you're a fan of the show down here in Vegas, you know this is a must. So make sure you go to manscaped.com, use the code TheGuestList for 20% off and free shipping. Your balls will thank you. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, we definitely want to find more distributors. Absolutely. Particularly, you know, we have a strong like market over here in the U.S., but there's tons of other countries that are doing great with cannabis as well, like Canada, Mexico. You know, we're in Spain as well, a couple countries in Europe. But we absolutely just want to, you know, kind of take it a little global, you know, because the U.S. market loves it, and I know every other market will love it too.
Do you know of any consumers who are wrapping this with or using this as a tobacco product, or is it built primarily for cannabis consumption?
I feel like when you sold that many, I feel like there has to be someone that's tried it for that. But absolutely, we don't recommend it for that. And we actually, you know, we were actually told at first with our merchant processors, like, you know, just say it's for tobacco, but we never wanted to, you know, so number one, I'm not going to try to push a tobacco product that I don't believe in, like a tobacco product. So we always stayed true to that and said, you know what, even though it's going to take us longer to find a merchant solution for this to be able to sell on our e-commerce store, we're never going to lie and say it's for tobacco. So it kind of hurt us in the short term, you know, obviously not being able to sell on your website as an e-commerce store, but in the end, I feel much better about it, you know, staying true to like what I believe in, you know, and that's always how I'm going to take everything, you know. Sometimes in the short term, you got to take that hit, you know. Similarly with the leaves, like I could easily have leaves and sell stuff to customers, but I'm just not going to do that, you know.
Yeah, and you have the perfect name too, Cannagar. It's just straight to the point. Easy to conceptualize what it is.
That one is actually not created by me.
Okay.
We call our product the CannaMold, which makes
CannaMold.
Cannagars.
Okay.
Yeah. But Cannagars was I'm not exactly sure which company coined that name, but it was pre-made Cannagar companies that would actually, you know, sell those $420 Cannagars. They started calling it a Cannagar first, and then I was like, okay, well, you know, we still call it like a tie stick press, but its main name is a CannaMold, and which makes Cannagars.
And do you have the patent for the CannaMold too?
So we started exploring. I actually had a provisional patent. We started exploring and started looking at options like that. But then I started realizing, you know what? There's always going to be knockoffs out there, and what's better than a patent is continuous innovation. You know, so you know, even if you did get a patent and someone were to infringe on it, Are you really going to go in those long legal battles and try to fight them on that, And again, even though you may stop a few of those big players, like there's going to be knockoff companies popping up all the time. We see that a lot. Some people make theirs look almost exactly like ours and, sell a 3D printed version. And we're like, okay, that's, same colors and everything. And it's cool. It's flattering, But again, I always believe that, instead of that, I'm just going to continually innovate, because by the time they catch up to our Generation 2 model, I already have the Generation 3 coming.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that knockoff products just reinforce the idea of the original product.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
What you see that with like knockoff designer brands. It just increases the value of the original Louis Vuitton bag because you see more mimics of that product, which therefore increases the value because it just shows that there's an interest for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like you said. It's like a proof that this is what the market wants.
And we do see a lot of knockoff or copycat kind of infringements in the tech industry as well. That was something that I learned when I was creating
Lyft and Uber.
Yeah, it's what I was when I was creating Chameleon with my partner Corey. We were talking about getting a patent for our product, and he was like, "Look, when it comes to technology, you can't really patent the idea. You can patent the
how it's done.
Yeah, how it's done or the UX pretty much to have the signature, but the idea you can't really patent, and you see that happening with Twitter doing stories, right? Or Instagram ripping off stories, and now Instagram's doing the TikTok model, and it's always going to be a copycat game in society. You just have to make your product the best, and I think it comes down to the community that you build around yourself, because that's something that you can't copy is community. If you have a firm belief system in a working product, you're not going to deter those people one direction or another.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% believe in that. I'm really big on brand. I'm really big on mission. I'm really big on values. So I really feel like that, like with Native Leaf, although we're the first, I'm sure there's going to be others to come. But while you can replicate us, you'd never be able to replicate like fully what we stand for, who we are, So I feel like a lot of people, as long as they believe the same things we believe, they'd rather stick with us than, somebody that came along and just tries to look like us.
How would you describe the community that is surrounding Native Leaf and Purple Rose Supply?
I would say it's ever growing, number one. And number two, the community is really, really strong. A lot of people believe in what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish, so it really feels great again to, sometimes you feel like, when you're trying to source the cleanest product and you're getting a whole bunch of no's or having to turn a whole bunch of people down, you feel like, is anyone else really like trying to do this? Are we like the only ones? But again, when you see a bunch of other businesses trying to do the same and a bunch of customers who really support what you're doing, like it's amazing. Even when we had to tell people like, hey, this is the situation, we're out of stock for X, Y, and Z. A lot of people were like, you know what, I'm gonna wait for the best. I'm not gonna take a shortcut just like you guys aren't. So it just feels really rewarding in that regard.
It's the way that society is progressing is more towards internet communities and more of a decentralized nature, right? Your community extends to other countries, as we mentioned before, and that's impossible. That would have been impossible to do just a few years ago or a few decades ago because of the power of the internet and social media, but also just reinforcing the idea that you're going towards natural products and that these things do take time. And I think customers are very aware of that there is no get rich quick scheme or there is no perfect product that's going to just pop up out of the blue. These things take time and they have to believe in you.
Yeah. And thankfully, most of our followers do, so it is really rewarding. It is really motivating. And it's like, okay, that's, when I get up in the morning, that's why I do it. There's a lot of people like me that are out there that really want the best for themselves and just feel like they need somebody on their side,
Do you go about engaging with your community in other ways that are outside of social media?
I want to say social media is the most, but we absolutely do a whole bunch of cannabis events, things like that. We are absolutely, when we do get a little more resources, I do want to tap more into like the local community, like the Vegas community. Well, you know, I grew up here. I went to high school here, so absolutely want to do more of that. You know, but right now it's predominantly online and cannabis events.
What type of events would you like to do?
I mean, for me, I always want to keep everything very, very mission aligned, because even though the mission is, you know, the company's actual, you know, it's like on our mission value statement, you know, to create a world where people are inspired to be the best they could be. I really, that's like was my own personal mission, you know? So, it's just like, I just got a whole bunch of people on board with that. So it kind of helps out, but you know, there's a whole bunch of, things that, eventually, I want to make sure we do, you know what I mean? Like trying to teach the local Vegas community, you know, trying to help out, trying to offer like educational seminars, things like that, you know, even within like our location at work, you know, we offer a whole bunch of internships. We offer a whole bunch of opportunities for everyone. You know, that's another reason. Not only do I do it for, you know, our customers, but everyone at work too. You know, I really believe in trying to help everyone kind of, you know, no matter where they're starting, just move on to like the next platform. You know, I started like a software engineering internship for one of our entry level associates that came in, was with us for 6 months, and said, you know what, I want to try programming. And I'm like, great, I have a lot of experience in that. Let's get you started and let's get you building systems. You know, so I kind of want to just expand kind of what we're doing internally, a little bit more externally with things like seminars, things that I thought of in the past was, you know, this is much later, but it would be great to have a startup incubator. You know what I mean? Things like that. You know, I did work under Tony Hseih for a little bit, and I think it was one of my last weeks of my internship where he first announced like the downtown project and all the startup incubators that he was going to try to do. And I was really like captivated by that mission. I was like, wow, that's going to be excellent. And, you know, obviously unfortunate what happened, but when, you know, definitely absolutely want to do, almost want to like pick up a little bit where he left off in that regard.
Tony's name comes up quite often on this podcast, and it's because I sit and talk with mostly entrepreneurs. And as an entrepreneur, he is somebody that possessed many values of an entrepreneur. You want to create value, but his leadership style was very, how do I describe this? He was a very selfless leader. His office, from what I hear, was on the same level with all the employees. Yeah. He didn't project himself to be this like micromanaging style. He was very hands off. What was your experience like working under Tony?
Yeah, so I never actually worked with him directly. You know, I would see him in the office, and yeah, it was absolutely like that. Like, you know, when you would see him, you would pass by, you would say hi, and you couldn't differentiate him from any other employee. When I actually started there, one of my somebody else that I was interning with told me that on his first day, he actually saw Tony and he was coming out of orientation. He didn't know who he was, and Tony said, "What'd you think of the orientation?" And he was like, "Oh man, it's really, really corny, but whatever. I guess this place is cool." And Tony just laughed, and then he walked by, and then other people were like, "Oh, what'd you and Tony talk about?" And he's like, "Who?" So it was like, you know, I mean, I think he absolutely did great things. And, you know, thankfully I was fortunate enough to work with a lot of leaders like Tony and kind of like modeled my leadership style over that. You know, over at Native Leaf and Purple Rose Supply, we don't really believe in like a strong hierarchy like that, you know, absolutely treat everyone with respect, you know, and just being able to give everyone the opportunity, no matter where you are in the company, to kind of move up and climb as high as you want. You know, that's something I firmly believe in. Never going to waver on that. And not only that, but it's like talking to everybody at work and having them come up to not only me, but everyone else that works there and be like, you know, working here has changed my life. You know, it's almost, I would say it's even more rewarding than the rewards I get from like, you know, people, you know, emailing me, telling me that, oh wow, your product is like the most amazing thing. You know, seeing the change within everyone that works at the company is something that, you know, you can't replace.
It's incredible. I do want to touch back on this startup incubator idea. This is a conversation I've had multiple times. I had on Jeff Sailing, who runs Startup Nevada, which was the first startup incubator out here, and it just started in 2017, which to me, I felt like this should have happened decades ago. Startup incubators breed some of the best innovative ideas this world has ever seen. Coinbase went through Y Combinator, Airbnb went through Y Combinator. I had a gentleman on the show who went through Y Combinator.
My old company, Y Combinator.
Yeah. Y Combinator it's just such a monumental company that has just bred some of the best innovators this world's ever seen. How do we bring that idea to Vegas? Have you thought about this at all?
A little bit, but not too deeply, just because obviously I have like a whole bunch of like other problems. You know, this is always something where I was like, okay, in a handful of years when we get even more resources, then absolutely this is a problem that I want to tackle. But I mean, I feel like one of the big shifts that needs to happen is, you know, there needs to be more of a focus on education, whether that is formal or informal. Over here in Las Vegas, you know, there's a lot of like, I guess I want to call them maybe money traps is a good way. You know, there's a lot of temptation. Exactly. You know, there's a lot of ways to make money quickly and easily that don't necessarily require you to elevate yourself onto a higher level that you're currently on. So I absolutely believe we need to figure out a way to shift in that direction before we, you know, some of those are successful. And even that's something I even thought of when Tony Hseih first announced it. When I read that email, I was like, well, there's not really and again, this is something that my teachers always told me. They were like, if you want to get a good education, do all this stuff, I don't think necessarily Vegas is the best place. I remember, I bet you remember how we ranked in our educational system all across the state.
Always bottom tier.
Exactly. It's not very, very good, you know, and even just growing up here, seeing the culture here, I was like, okay, we need to make shifts in that regards. If this is going to be something that's very, very successful, you know, get people excited about education. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be formal education. In particular, even at Native Leaf and Purple Rose Supply, one thing that we look for, we always try to, we'd always rather pull somebody with a non-traditional educational background than somebody with like a 4-year college degree or any degree for that matter, you know. Just somebody that's very, very driven and growth focused. I'd always rather have that than somebody, you know, because somebody that, you know, comes from a 4-year background, it's like, well, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get opportunities. So I always want to give it to, you know, somebody that may be overlooked in that regard, but still has that same hunger, same fire within them, you know.
So that's a more important trait when you're looking for the right employees to hire. They need to possess the intangibles rather than have the paper documentation that they can do it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You know, even as a software engineer, I quickly learned that, you know, when I started interviewing people, the educational background doesn't necessarily mean anything. You know, I've interviewed people from top schools and was more impressed with a lot of people that, you know, came from those non-traditional backgrounds that just had more fire in them, you know.
I think having curiosity is the most important trait one can possess. Curiosity leads you down so many varying avenues that becomes so specific to you that eventually you take all of those avenues, converge them, and create a product that nobody else can replicate.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, I feel like that may be a little bit what happened here.
Yeah, it exactly is. When you have dozens or hundreds or thousands of people who are all riding down the same path, there's no originality. Everyone is thinking the same. It's very robotic. And then you're basically just being trained to live your life on automation or autopilot.
Exactly.
But if you live a life of intention and you follow your curiosity, whether it be good or bad, right? Curiosity leads you to successes. It also leads you to failures.
Yeah.
But if you just continue working down those paths of originality, then eventually you find yourself in a unique position to build something or to find yourself in a startup, right? I think you have to be a bit curious to work for a startup because there's a lot of risk that's involved in that because the company could go under any second or any day. And you have to, as you mentioned earlier, you have to kind of put a hat on for multiple positions, which requires varying degrees of skill sets to be able to perform that job.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it also requires like a beyond curiosity and an attitude where no matter how many times you get knocked down, you just keep climbing up, and that's something that we always believe in. We always throw people into situations in which we know they'll get knocked down, but kind of seeing how they react to that, and also just being there, being like, hey, it's okay, you just get back up and let's go at it again. That's it's definitely great, and especially seeing those people that obviously if you're doing something challenging, very very challenging, of course you're gonna fail, but seeing them not only fail but come up from that failure and achieve a much higher skill set than they originally had is super rewarding.
It's not how far you fall, but how high you bounce afterwards.
Yeah,
you need to have that trampoline effect to propel yourself towards success. You're going to come across thousands of failures in your entire life, but you need to have that perspective that failure isn't necessarily that objective failure. It's a subjective failure that'll eventually be pivoted towards a successful route, as long as you can kind of derive those skills that you learned during that failure and then apply it to your future endeavor or mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I feel like the only way a failure is a true failure is if you didn't learn anything from it. That's the only time in my mind where it's like, okay, you don't want to fail.
Are there any major failures in your life that you look back on and realize that was the turning point in your life that propelled you towards this route of success?
A handful of failures, before Purple Rose Supply. I tried various different businesses, trying to always just find, again, because I always had that feeling that I'm working really hard in this, but is this really what I want to do? So trying a handful of businesses like that. I've tried Amazon businesses, random things like that. And just having those failures knock me down. But again, like for me, I don't really consider them failures because I feel like I learned a lot from them, and which kind of helped me when it finally went to Purple Rose Supply. I was like, well, I have a lot of experience in these things, so now I kind of know what not to do. And again, so I really, different ways you could look at it. You could look at that very, very short moment and think, okay, that was a failure in my life. Or for me, I kind of see it as an extension of my success, because had I not had those failures, I wouldn't have gained the knowledge, the experience to be able to have the success.
We live in an age of infinite leverage, and that leverage can be applied from your successes and your failures, or just your experiences in general. It doesn't have to be one or the other. As long as you're just existing and analyzing what's going on around you, you can always apply that to whatever you want to do in the future, which in your case, you learned code, you went to college, right? I'm sure you probably had a crazy ass time in college, as most of us do. You mentioned you're also a frat guy as well. So we got to learn social skills in college. And when you're in a fraternity, you take on different leadership positions, or you take on a social chair or a philanthropic chair, and you build these things towards your fraternity that maybe don't have an impact on your life directly, but those are the skills, the foundational skills you learn to when you build a company and you're CEO, a founder of two different companies, you realize that you're applying that same skill set that you had learned in college.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I those chairs you mentioned, I actually, those were my chairs. Yeah, social and philanthropy.
Saw it for right when you walked in.
But I did absolutely get experience in that. But also, just trying to be like a leader as well as a role model for a lot of the new younger members that came on. I didn't realize it at the time, but I did gain a lot of like potential leadership skills from that, and always just trying to kind of steer people towards the right path. Again, I guess I feel like inherently it's always, kind of been my mission to I just always want to see everyone be the best they could be. I don't know what it is about me, but it was always that. And I guess, when I was in the fraternity, I was doing it through that aspect and trying to guide the next generation on, things you should do, things you shouldn't do,
Exactly. It's the way that you have to do it. All right. Anything upcoming for Native Leaf Co. or Purple Rose Supply that you'd like to make an announcement, or we're going to see anything in the near future? Products? There's
absolutely a lot, again, when it comes to patents for Purple Rose Supply, as I mentioned, we are coming up with a new generation. So instead of getting that patent, we're going to have a new model that other people are going to have to catch up on. And by the time they catch up on that, we'll have an even newer model, you know. So we're absolutely always going to be innovating the main product of Purple Rose Supply. But not only that, same with Native Leaf as well. When it comes to the wrap, I guess like the rap game, you know?
I love it.
There's a lot you could do. You know, you could look at a lot of companies currently doing it right now, and you know, there's a lot of things like cones, even like better versions of what we have right now. You know, because one of the things that we pride ourselves on with Native Leaf is our product is 30-day slow cured, but we kind of know what happens when you take it further than that. It's similar to dry aging, you know. There is, you know, you could have things that are dry aged for X amount of time, but if they're dry aged a little bit longer, they end up producing new flavors, a much more complex flavor profile. So those are things we're always exploring when it comes to Native Leaf Co.
Boom. I'm excited for the future.
Yeah,
I have
absolutely.
one final question for you before we get out of here. Same question to everybody. What does Las Vegas mean to you?
Las Vegas means it's a little bit the Wild West, but for me, it's home. You know, that's very short and sweet, but for me, I really think it's home.
Right, straight to the heart. Where do I send all of the listeners and viewers to follow you along your journey or get involved with Native Leaf or Purple Rose Supply?
Yeah, check us out on purplerosesupply.com. Our Instagram is also Purple Rose Supply. Same nativeleafco.com or Native Leaf Co on Instagram.
Boom. Sidney, thank you for coming on, man.
Awesome.
I love the product, but I enjoy more so your contrarian take on where the industry's headed, and that you are following the process of most resistance. But oftentimes when you're following that path that has a lot of resistance, you know that it's an original path that you're curating yourself. And so I firmly believe that you will find some success out here.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not the beaten path, you know. It's paving something new, so super excited. And thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you next time.